This week on QDL, we talk with Lisa Ryan, Chief Appreciation Strategist with Grategy, about how you can help your employees deal with tough times. You don't want to miss this segment, so come back in 30 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. So, most companies, particularly smaller ones I would say, larger companies can have this problem too, I think mostly smaller ones, go through rough patches. Now these could be business downturns, it could be a loss of key leadership, or maybe even key employees. It could be a death. And particularly within smaller companies, even the passing of a liked employee can have a big impact. It could be a natural catastrophe. So there's a lot of things. And some employees take these hardships in stride, and some don't. Some deal well. Some actually, these kind of events can really impact their personal life and impact their life at work. So as a leader, what is the best way to help your employees navigate tough times? Well, here once again to talk to us about employee-related topics is Lisa Ryan, Chief Appreciation Strategist with Grategy, and an award-winning speaker who works with organizations to keep their top talent from becoming somebody else's top talent. Okay, Lisa, thanks for joining us again.
Hey, I'm grateful to be here, and actually gratitude is the key for all the things that we deal with that can go wrong in our businesses and in our lives. This is a practice I started probably 10 years ago with a group of friends, writing down 5 things every day that I was grateful for. And we just did it as a group of friends. I didn't really expect anything from it, but it was that single practice that has changed every area of my life. And I've read thousands of books and white papers and attended programs to see, is gratitude more than this feel-good emotion that we normally associate with it? And I found out that there was.
Well, let me interject here just a little bit. I mean,
Sure.
so you and I have talked before, and this idea of gratitude kind of flows through everything that you talk about. So when it comes to a major upheaval, so, a company goes through some sort of major catastrophe or minor catastrophe or whatever, so some sort of tough times, does gratitude play a role in helping heal what's going on within that company or helping those particular people that might be having a hard time within that company dealing with whatever this quote catastrophe is or tough time is?
Absolutely. In a perfect world, the practice would have already been ongoing, so people are in the mode of looking for good things. But when something tragic is happening, and you sit down and think about, okay, well, what can I find to be grateful for in this situation? The company had a downturn. We have to have a layoff. Okay, what can I find to be good about that? All right, well. We're still in business. We don't have to go out of business. We will have the potential to maybe have people work fewer hours. Maybe we can find a way so that we don't have to have layoffs. You come at it from a positive standpoint. And I'm not talking a Pollyanna attitude that, everything's always perfect, but really looking for the good. And when you're going through a particularly tough time, yes, that can be very difficult to find. So that's what I'm saying. You're not burying those emotions after you get out of the rawness of whatever that is, to find that one thing. So companies can have their own practices. I was working with a golf course a couple years ago, and they liked the idea so much, for example, that they put a ledger by the time clock. And when employees would punch in, and then they would write something that they were grateful for on that ledger. So starting off the day on a positive note. I had a manufacturing company that I was working with, and they actually manufactured plastics. And they had a clear plastic container in the middle of the shop. And what they would do is during their company meetings, they would choose 3 or 4 employees to write down something that they were grateful for. They would share that with the group, and then they would put it in this clear plastic box. So as the year went on, people could physically see that box filling up with good things. And at the end of the year, they would take the time to go through and to count those blessings. So there's lots of practices. It's not an immediate fix. It's not an overnight fix, but it can certainly take the sting off of when things do go wrong.
Okay, now I want to look at this from kind of two different perspectives. One is, let's say, an employer catastrophe or tough times that strikes the employer, and then we'll also go back and look at tough times that strike your employees, but not necessarily the company itself. So, from the employer, let's just make up an example. Let's just say it's some sort of economic downturn. Business has really dropped off or something like that, and so now the company's having to tighten its belt and so forth. How much does honesty and transparency with your employees play into this? And how much honesty and transparency should a company even have with whatever it's going through, if it's financial?
It is absolutely critical to be as transparent as you humanly possibly can. Because if you are not transparent, employees can kind of pick up that there's something off, that there's something going wrong. They're not seeing the number of orders coming through. They're not as busy as they once were. And unless you as a manager are willing to say, hey, this is what's going on, the employees are going to make stuff up. It's called the grapevine. And if they don't know what's going on, they will guess. And then those guesses become their reality. And in most times, the way the employee catastrophizes something is probably a lot worse than what's actually going on. Whereas if management sat down with the employees to say, this is what's happening, we're kind of stuck right now. We're not sure what's going to happen. What ideas do you have? Companies that have done that have come up with amazing strategies. I've heard of companies where the employees will say that, we will work less hours or take less money just to get the company by for a couple months. They've had, I'm trying to think of the other ways, but employees of looking at ways that each of them took a personal accountability to do what they could do to save the company money. And all of those little things added up and saved the company. So when you have, like we talked about on the last episode, that engaged employee, and now you as a manager are being honest with them, being transparent with them, they're committed to your organization. And now, because they know what's going on, it's like they will see how they can be a part of it. And if something does happen where, it's not, their job is not salvageable, now that employer can say, hey, we're going to do everything we can to help get you placed, to make the transition smooth. And there's lots of things that you can do, but being as transparent as humanly possible, you're not going to go wrong with that.
Okay. So now let's take the flip side of that. And we've experienced this here. We live near a town called Paradise, and you probably saw that in the news late last year. Pretty much the entire town burned to the ground. Well, that's just right up the hill from us. Impacted about a third of our employees. So when something strikes and it affects your employees, or another example might be the crash of 2008, that affected a lot of people, right? So as an employer, if you have a bunch of employees, a few or many, and they've been impacted by a natural catastrophe or some sort of economic downturn or whatever, how as an employer, well, number one, do you have a duty as an employer to deal with that at all? Number one, and if you do, how do you deal with it?
Every every situation is different. I mean, it's somebody, a house burning down versus an economic collapse versus a death. Each of those you're looking at differently and trying to reach out to the employee again as a human being with that connection. How can I help? Sometimes just letting the employee know that you're there is a huge deal. A couple of years ago when my father-in-law died, my husband's boss came to the funeral. That personal connection made a huge difference for Scott because there was that, he knew that Tom really cared about him as, not as only as an employee 9 to 5 during the week, but also was there for him in a time of sadness. As an organization, the National Speakers Association, for example, that I'm a member of, has a fund that they put aside. So when fires happen, or a couple of years ago when all the hurricanes were going on, the NSA reaches out to our members to help them financially as much as they can. Again, the money that they're giving makes an impact, but also the fact that somebody's there, somebody's listening, and somebody cares. That also makes a difference.
You in your the last time we were on the show, and also in your book that you hand out at your conferences very often. By the way, this is very interesting. This is a manufacturing engagement from Lisa Ryan, and there's a link underneath the player page down here with her email. You can email her, and she can send you a PDF of this. Really, a lot of really interesting suggestions in here, but it gets down to being, I guess, personal, knowing your employees on an individual level, or at least what they're, who they are, what their likes, what their dislikes are, being able to personalize, if I'm reading this right, being able to personalize your response to them, no matter what it is, whether it's tragedy or accolades for something, that being able to do that on a very personal level is kind of key to everything that we're talking about, right?
Right. And when you're looking at different tragedies of whatever happens, to really look at your level of flexibility. If you work at a plant where you have a 3 strike, you have 3 absences or 10 tardies that work up to 1 absence or whatever it is, and that is not movable. And now that employee whose house burned to the ground, they have to find new housing. They have to replace everything that they ever own. Their kids are shaken up. So looking at it from a temporary setback of how can we help you? Well, instead of coming in at 7, it would be great if I could come in at 10. I have these things going on in the morning. And again, looking for the little things that you can do. And a lot of that is just asking employees, how can we help you? How can we be there for you? Because now you are showing them that you care, and you're probably going to be surprised that they're not asking for nearly as much as you think that they're going to ask for when you ask that question.
Yeah. Can you, have you dealt in your career, have you dealt with companies that have gone through some sort of major turmoil?
Funny you asked, because actually October 12th, 2010, I was working in medical sales, having the greatest career, having the greatest year of my life. I was on the way to winning the sales trip for the first time, and I was invited to an organizational announcement. I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I was safe. I was having a great year. I had been on every product marketing team with the organization. I was well known, well liked, blah, blah, blah. And on that call, they basically said, company is losing $10 million this year. Your position's been eliminated, effective immediately. Please stay off the phone so our outplacement firm can call you, and we're not going to answer any questions. You'll have to wait till you get your package from FedEx, and then HR will call you. Goodbye, click.
So basically the opposite of what you've been saying.
12 of us on the phone at that time. Now, we talked a little bit about the grapevine earlier. So for months after that phone call, because the company never addressed it again, and I still had lots of friends that work there, every time there was a phone call, every time there was a meeting, people were on eggshells. They were afraid. They didn't know what to do. I was with that company for 7 years, and there was never a thank you for everything that you did. We felt really bad about having to do this. I mean, if they would have called me as an individual and said, Lisa, we really are going through severe financial difficulties. This is a really difficult decision, but we're going to have to let you go. And then here's how we're going to take care of you. Because frankly, they took great care of me. Okay? Yeah. But if they would have just had that individual conversation and done that. So as a business leader, there are difficult decisions that you have to make. Even when you're firing somebody who's a horrible employee, you're affecting their kids, their family, you're affecting more than that one person, and it's difficult. But if you can be transparent, if you can look for ways to help that employee, to have the conversation, to thank them, going back to gratitude for what they did for your organization, to help them with whatever their next is. There's so many things that you can do to reach out on an individual level, connecting specifically with that person and specifically with what they're going through.
Right. So kind of the right way and the wrong way to do things there.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Lisa, that's what we got time for today. Lisa Ryan, Chief Appreciation Strategist with Grategy. Thanks for joining us today as usual, and we're going to have Lisa back on the show some more. She's really interesting, so I want to be sure to get you back. And be sure to check out Lisa's book, Manufacturing Engagement, 98 Proven Strategies to Attract and Retain Your Industry's Top Talent. We have a link to a PDF of the book on our player page, so click on that link. The book is full of useful and common sense suggestions on how to engage your employees. All right, and now we turn to today's Tech Corner, recorded in Quality Digest Studios in Chico, California a few weeks ago. The folks from Nikon brought in a fantastic array of great Nikon metrology equipment, from microscopes to an SEM. I had a great time geeking out on all the equipment, a lot of fun. So in this segment, Dennis Fenn of Nikon Metrology shows us the MM800 measuring microscope. And with us today is Dennis Fenn. He's the Senior Technical Sales Engineer with Nikon Metrology, and we are looking at a manual microscope today, is that right?
That is correct. What we're showing today right now is the universal configuration, but it does come in many different configurations, from a toolmaker's microscope, which would have a single long working distance objective. So if you needed something with a large focus depth to be able to see down past a fixture, or just your part has a lot of Z to it. And in this case, the universal, which has Nikon's compound objectives on it, which allows you to get very high numerical aperture for measuring very high resolution on small parts.
Okay. And show us some of the key features of it.
Key features are, it has a motorized nose piece, so that if you have a sample where you don't want to get your hands above for contamination, it has the ability to enter your points without having to do that. You can hear the beep there, without having to put your hands in contaminating your sample. It has very high precision stages, 10th micron scales.
Okay.
There is even a higher precision model that is available at special request. Ergonomic features such as a tilt head, so that you have a diopter adjustment, as well as the tilt for ergonomics. And an advantage with this is you have all the features that you can use optically for bright field, dark field, and DIC imaging.
Okay. And I know this obviously manual microscope, digital readout, DRO. What DRO boxes will this work with?
Nikon is unique in that you can configure this with many different configurations for the metrology processors. This one is the L series, which works with Nikon scales, but there's an S series as well that allows you to connect it to multiple different third-party metrology boxes that are available in the market.
Okay. Different light sources?
Yes, this has, like I say, you can do a top light, and you can also do a bottom light. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. There are also, with the toolmakers configurations, LEDs for off-axis illumination.
Okay. So why don't you maybe show us, and we can look at it on the screen here. We've got a camera hooked up to this. Why don't you show us what a typical measurement routine might look like?
Yeah, in this configuration, you might find this in a small machine shop. What they'd be using it for is I can quickly use the stage here to place my crosshair, and maybe I just want to measure the width of this feature.
Okay.
So we would reset the DRO, and if I want to, I can just reset my scales here.
Okay.
So we'll enter this first point, and then I can move in X, or in Y in this case, and measure the other. So I've moved in millimeters, 0.38 millimeters.
And then we see our measurement here on the DRO. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So what kind of accuracy?
The scale has 10th micron accuracy.
Okay.
It depends on your objective and some other things as well. As far as your part, it may present different. But as far as an absolute accuracy, 10th micron scales on the stage.
Okay, and focus, is it manual focus?
This is the LM, so it is a motorized version.
Okay.
If you can see on the screen here, you can see that I'm focusing up and down using the control pad over here on the side.
Okay. Is it possible to do autofocus on different models of this?
This does have the ability to do autofocus. There's a module that you can buy that would motorize the Z on this.
So Dennis, tell me a little bit about all the various, well, probably not all the various lenses, but tell me a little bit about why there are so many lenses or objectives, I should say, and how they are used, kind of what the different functions might be.
Oh, there's anywhere from just a epi objective, which would be a reflected light. But in this case, with the lever here, you have a dark field objective.
Okay.
That's used a lot in semiconductor. If you, what the availability of the dark field objective is it gives you an oblique lighting technique, so that the light scatters off the surface back into the objective in a different way. If you can revert to the screen, you can see the difference in the image between a bright field and a dark field image.
Okay.
There's also super long working distance objectives that I mentioned, or ELWD. If you need to get further away from your sample, these are bright field and dark field objectives that we have on the system right now. But it depends on the application.
Okay.
For a lot of semiconductor and some other types of work on maybe optics, you want maybe that dark field capability. Whereas in others, you just need an epi objective. It's just a reflected light objective. So it's really kind of application driven on which objectives that you're going to choose. And then magnifications are what are the size of the feature I want to measure. I may have to go up to 100x to be able to image that, whereas maybe at a different application, I just want a very large field of view, so I'd use a 1x.
Okay. And so, and obviously, you can mix and match objectives just on the turret there, depending on how maybe what your most common usages are in your particular shop.
That's correct.
Okay. So you don't have to have certain, I don't know, classes of objectives necessarily.
I could mix and match. It really depends on the application, and every system that we sell has a different complement of objectives that are installed on the system.
And who do you typically see using? Is this kind of what you call maybe a workhorse microscope? A lot of different types of companies using it, or is it more specialized?
This is a workhorse. It's used in many different industries. Like I'd mentioned, anywhere from a very small machine shop, small volume production, all the way up through Fortune 500 companies.
Okay. Any other features you want to point out on it? We talked about again, I think you mentioned that the objectives can be changed without having to get your hand over the area, right? And you mentioned for contamination. I mean, is that really an issue where somebody just really going in? And...
Well, if you're doing a semiconductor or a medical device, you don't want to contaminate your sample.
So even just reaching up there and touching flakes of skin may come off or something.
That's
or
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a motorized. You can't turn it manually if you want to. There's manual there's manual nose pieces that are available. There are multiple different configurations of objectives from Nikon. Like I said, you can use the full line of microscope objectives that are available. Whether or not you need super high resolution, which maybe have a smaller working distance, or extra long working distance, or SLWD, which are super long working distance objectives.
Okay.
So there's an objective to meet your need.
And what about what size parts? I guess volumes of parts are we talking
MM
about?
series comes in a 200, which would just be a 200 millimeter.
Okay.
It's a very small type of stage, all the way up to the MM800. So whether or not you need MM400 or an MM800. This stage is 12 by 8.
Okay.
12 inches by 8 inches.
Big stage. Okay.
Yes.
So what, I mean, if you were to say what makes the MM800 stand out from other, let's say, similar types of products, what would it be? What's its distinguishing features?
Nikon is unique in that we support multiple different third-party metrology processing.
Okay.
Also the accuracy and the support that you get from Nikon.
Okay. All right. Well, Dennis Fenn, Senior Technical Sales Engineer with Nikon Metrology. Thanks for showing us the MM800.
Thank you very much.
So thanks to Dennis and the entire crew of Nikon Metrology who joined us in our studios. You can see more Nikon Metrology equipment in upcoming shows, so keep your eyes open for that. And if you want more information on the MM800 or any other Nikon products, you can follow the link in the player page down below. And once again, thanks to Lisa Ryan for joining us as well. And that is it for today's show. As usual, if there is someone you would like to see on the show or some topic or product you would like us to cover, send those ideas to us at QDL@qualitydigest.com and we will try to get them on the show. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week on QDL. So long.